and so on. I mean, clearly, the search for a vaccine, a workable vaccine, is vital. There are probably, I think, out of all the different vaccine attempts around the world, there are maybe 10 or 12 that look really promising. If there's a therapeutic drug that allows us to reduce the severity of the disease, that's also really important. And, making sure that we're in a situation where, people just are, as Paolo was just saying earlier about shops and so on, taking all those measures that are likely to constrain the disease. So all of these things will have to remain in place whilst we search for a vaccine that works and that works at scale. And then, by the way, we're going to have to make absolutely sure that that vaccine is available throughout the world, including to the poorest parts, not just the wealthy parts.
All right, thank you. Paolo Gentiloni?
I only would add to what Tony said, that in this road from now to the vaccine, that unfortunately we don't know how long it will be from now to the vaccine distributed all over the world. We have to take the measures we were talking about, but also I think we have to concentrate on preventing the risk that the curve that began in East Asia and then took Europe and then America, North America and South America, will not have a new surge in Central Asia and in Africa, because this is a real danger for these countries and for the global situation. So I would add only this: be careful in helping all these countries to face this risk in Africa and in Central Asia.
You're right, because of course Asia has had far fewer deaths at 25,000, Africa 3,000, and so far they seem to have avoided the mass deaths that we've seen elsewhere in the world. Thank you very much indeed. Sewa, I hope that answered your question. Let's go now to Yangon, Myanmar, and Danesh Zaveri. Danesh, over to you.
How will our privacy be affected after the coronavirus?
All right, concerns about privacy and surveillance and so on. Paolo Gentiloni.
Thank you, Danish, for your question. Let me give a EU answer, which is in this case rather specific, because I know that in Asia, for example, we had different experiences. In the Union, in the European Union, what we are asking is first that all the tracing tools take in account and respect our privacy rules that we have established in the Union. And second, that these apps should be voluntary adopted. I know that here again we need a balance between two different fundamental targets and rights: the right to privacy and the right of safety in our communities. But you can break this balance only in the cases when an outbreak is there and in extraordinary circumstances. We can't use measures against privacy in a massive and permanent way.
Tony Blair, do you agree with what Paolo Gentiloni has been saying?
I agree with Paolo, yes. I think that it's a balance that you're going to strike, and Dinesh, is actually a very good question people ask everywhere. The problem is, I think most people in principle think it's a good idea that you're able to track and trace, but it depends on the government itself in your own country to the degree to which they're prepared to operate this system in a fair way. So what I would say is, you need to have proper rules around it, and you need the government to be accountable, because obviously it is a very powerful tool in the hands of government, and therefore it's got to be used responsibly. But I'm afraid whether that tool is used responsibly and fairly will depend on the government itself. But this would be something where it would be sensible to try and get some global rules around it, because everyone again is facing exactly the same issue.
Thank you very much indeed. Now we're going to go to Paris, France. Muriel Tibiet Batoud. What do you want to ask our two panelists?
Did coronavirus taught us the good side of a holistic societies, where the group's interest rises above the individual, compared to modern societies where the individual is put forward most of the time? Is it a good life lesson?
Oh, well, there you are. And of course, there's got to be something a bit philosophical coming from France, which is what we should expect. So thank you very much indeed there, Muriel. Tony Blair, briefly on that one, if you would.
Yes, good point. I mean, by the way, we're going to need that same spirit of collective endeavor to deal with the aftermath of COVID, because the economic and social costs are going to be so great. and we're going to have to look after some of the poorest, most vulnerable people who are going to be most at risk in the aftermath, not just from COVID itself. So let's hope that we have learned this philosophically within our own societies, and then frankly it would be great if the world would show a greater commitment to global cooperation in the aftermath as well.
Paolo Gentiloni, is this a good lesson for Europeans, Muriel asks? Because, you know, in Europe, compared to other parts of the world, Asia, Africa, there is a greater emphasis, isn't there, on the individual rather than the community, broadly speaking?
Yes, the individual, for sure, is so important in our societies, but we perhaps rediscovered in these weeks the importance of cooperation, both at community level and at international level. I hope that in the post-pandemic world, we will keep these lessons. This means to fight against solitude in our communities and to use multilateralism and cooperation at a global level. If we do so, I think that the two enemies that we have, selfishness and nationalism, could have bad results from this pandemic. But it will be a fight. It's not something that we have for sure.
Muriel, do you hope that that will be the outcome, more emphasis on the community rather than the individual? Is that what you want to see?
Yes, I feel there is a change in mentalities where we realize we're humans and we're vulnerable, and that's a step forward.
Thank you. Well, just on social media, Charles from South Africa asks, are we moving into an era that's going to be dominated by viral infections on an international scale, so that we're going to have to cope with these kind of infestations intermittently affecting our lives? So it sounds like on social media we've had a lot of people just sort of saying, are these changes post-COVID-19 going to be permanent, or will they be for better or for worse, as Delma asks? I'll go to you, Paolo Gentiloni.
In a certain sense, I don't think that they will be permanent, because sooner or later we will defeat this virus with a vaccine, but we have to keep the lessons of these weeks very strong. And one of these is the importance of public health care. We saw how important this is for facing these risks. The second one is the importance of a safety net for jobs, which will demonstrate its importance in the next weeks. And the third one is the importance of democracy, of transparency, of the rule of law. And I have to say that these are also three assets very important for Europe.
Tony Blair?
So I think there are opportunities to make things better coming out of COVID. First of all, obviously we should be prepared for the next pandemic. We should be making sure, because these things will happen again, so we should be building the infrastructure nationally and internationally in order to deal with it better. Secondly, I think we've shown what can be done and how you can mobilize people and resources to focus on problems. So maybe you need to take some of those lessons from, as it were, wartime and apply them to peacetime, and think how, for example, when you're dealing with the question of the environment, could you also be dealing with that with the same urgency that we've dealt with COVID-19?
Thank you very much indeed, Tony Blair and Paolo Gentiloni. So I hope we brought you some answers to some pretty difficult questions about lifting lockdown. Thank you very much indeed to my two panelists and to my questioners who joined us from all over the world, and to you also, wherever you're watching or listening to this program. And don't forget, if you'd like to be part of the program or submit a question to our panel for our next program, then please email globalquestions@bbc.co.uk. But for now, from me, Zainab Badawi, and the rest of the Global Questions team, goodbye. Support for Alaska Public Media comes from listeners like you. Thank you.
Many thanks to Alaska Public Media visionaries Gary and Jane Cloffer, whose strong financial support helps meet the news and programming needs of our state in an ever-changing media landscape. Thank you.
So what do the pandemic and the climate crisis have in common? It's a mindset.
They require us to take strong action without being able to control the outcome.
I'm Manoush Zamarodi, re-energizing the fight against the climate crisis. That's next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR.
Sunday at 10 a.m., repeating Wednesday at 7 p.m. on FM 91.1.
Alaska Public Media accepts gifts of stock. Learn more at alaskapublic.org/stock or by contacting your financial advisor.
stats on the coronavirus and testing, but how accurate or creative can some of those reports be? Also, a new perplexity in a pandemic world. Public restrooms. You stay at home, find a safe way to go. And a new movie streaming this Memorial Day weekend tells the story of choirs, military wives in the UK. Kristen Scott Thomas is one of the stars. She grew up in a military family, and she knows what it's like.
Having to hold the fort, having to deal with the family, having to deal with absence, and all that mixed in with a great feeling of service.
First, we have our newscast. Today is Saturday, May 23rd, 2020.
Live from NPR News, I'm Giles Snyder. The first round of the federal small business rescue effort, the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, was immensely popular with the funds gone in less than 2 weeks, but lending has slowed considerably in the second round of funding, as NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben reports.
The second pot of PPP funding at $310 billion opened on April 27th. Nearly 4 weeks later, data from the Small Business Administration show that more than $140 billion remained as of late this week. Relatedly, the loans going out now are smaller than in the first round. The program's average loan size right now is around $116,000, compared to more than $200,000 in round one. The loans are potentially forgivable if the businesses use the money in certain ways, including spending most of it on payroll. Businesses have complained about these restrictions, including the fact that they have only 8 weeks to spend the money. There is bipartisan congressional support to double that time frame. Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR News.
To Kansas now, where Wichita City Council member Brandon Johnson says local leaders and activists are banding together to raise awareness about the coronavirus in vulnerable communities after a study showed a large racial disparity among those who have died.
Going forward, we have to be more intentional about thinking about these vulnerable communities first and making sure that those needs are met so that we all can be equally taken care of.
According to the study by UC Berkeley, Kansas has the largest racial disparity of COVID-19 deaths in the country, with African Americans making up a third of the state's death toll, despite accounting for just 5% of the population. The Hertz car rental giant has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. NPR's Jen Newman reports that the company is unable to withstand the abrupt decline in revenue caused by the coronavirus pandemic.
The 102-year-old company says bankruptcy protection will help it survive through
Hill, Aoife O'Donovan, Freestyle Love Supreme, and Tom Papa.
Saturday at 2 p.m. on FM 91.1.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. Thanks for being with us. I'm Scott Simon. The number of Americans who have died from the coronavirus now approaches 100,000. President Trump threatens to override governors who refuse to reopen religious houses of worship and once again contradicts guidance on coronavirus precautions from the CDC. And Joe Biden apologizes for a remark. Joining us now is NPR senior editor and correspondent Ron Elving. Ron, thanks so much for being with us.
I deem it essential to be with you this morning, Scott.
and you are our essential worker, my friend, too. Let's begin with Joe Biden. He was being interviewed by radio personality Charlemagne the God, and Mr. Biden said, quote, "If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black."
So within hours, Biden apologized, said he shouldn't have been trying to be what he called a wise guy. But isn't it amazing someone who owes his nomination to black voters in the primaries can still have such a tin ear when it comes to race? You remember back a dozen years ago when he called his rival candidate, Barack Obama, clean and articulate, and when he referred to the impeachment of Bill Clinton as a lynching. But he'll pay a price for his latest pratfall because he reinforces here the argument that Democrats take black votes for granted. And we should add, Biden was also stepping on his own talking points Friday because of the run of bad news President Trump had this week.
And let's list some of that. Of course, it's not just President Trump's bad news, but nearly 100,000 people in the United States have died from COVID-19. Nearly 40 million people are out of work. And so far, how does the president respond?
He has called for all flags to be flown at half-mast to salute the victims. But he has also urged that shutdowns and quarantines be lifted and threatened governors who hesitate to greenlight people congregating for religious services. He has cast doubt on the actual death toll, suggesting the numbers might be cooked to make him look bad. And he continues to look for a magic bullet in a therapy or a vaccine or to wear a mask in public.
He also took the time to criticize the possibility of voting by mail this week. More states obviously looking at that because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and this has become the new focus for very long-standing allegations from the president of voter fraud or illegal voting. But voting by mail is kind of a curious focal point, especially for a president who himself votes by mail. Absentee ballots generally have tended to be used more by Republicans than Democrats. But now, of course, the issue is that voting by mail keeps millions of people safe from viruses or, for that matter, long lines and harassment at actual in-person polling places.
The polls in a number of Senate races in a number of key states show Republicans falling behind. How concerned is the party?
Reasonably concerned. Half a dozen Republican seats are now vulnerable, not just Colorado and Maine we've known about, but also Arizona and North Carolina and possibly others, Montana, possibility. And winning even half of those states could give the Democrats their first Senate majority since 2014 if they win the presidency and get the tie-breaking vote of the vice president.
I have to ask you about one of those Senate races because there's been a overnight development. Jeff Sessions, former Attorney General, President Trump's first Attorney General, and he recused himself from the Russia probe. President Trump has criticized him a lot, but yesterday he slammed him as untrustworthy and endorsed his rival in the Republican primary. And Jeff Sessions fired back, didn't he?
Yes, he has endured endless abuse from the president since that recusal in March of 2017. Now he's running to get his old Senate seat back, and the president is still trash-talking him on Twitter.